Hello everyone, my name is Made Radyaning.
My name is Ryandra Ghifari.
And my name is Parikesit Nuril Azmi. We are Group 7 and today we will be presenting to you about matching in experimental design.
Next slide please. Okay, so before we get into the main discussion of today's presentation, we would like to tell you about what exactly is experimental design. So, experimental design can simply be defined as how participants are categorized in an experiment. Next slide please. Well, as you guys can see, there are 4 components of experimental design, which comprises of materials, measures, procedure, and participants. And the topic of participants is our main focus for today. Well, in handling experimental design, a researcher should know about selection, assignment, and number of participants in their experiment. First, selection process for the participant can be categorized into 2 types. The first one is random allocation or true experiment, and non-random allocation or quasi-experiment. Moreover, a researcher should also identify whether they would like to systematically control the variables that might influence the outcomes. Well, for the approaches that can be used to utilize the outcomes in terms of the participants, there are, as you guys can see, there are 3 types of design, including repeated measures, independent groups, and match pairs design, which is our main focus of discussion for today. Next slide, please. So, briefly, we can say that matching participants' main goal is to actually match participants in terms of certain characteristics. My friend Azza will tell you more in the next slide.
So the exact definition of experimental matching is that it is a method of experimental design where subjects are grouped into pairs that share traits, variables, and characteristics relevant to the study, divided into control experimental groups to random criteria. What this means is that in experimental matching, you're going to have pairs of people assigned by the researcher, depending on the characteristics that the researcher thinks is important to influencing the outcome of this experiment, right? The criteria themselves can be as wide as age, IQ, body weight, body height. It can be a lot of things, depending on what the researcher wants to research right now. So, for example, if a researcher wishes to study something about intelligence using experimental matching, then they would have IQ and general education level be a variable that is defined in the experimental matching, and where everyone else is divided into. The purpose of experimental matching is to increase the comparability and validity of study with a smaller sample size and to enforce impacts of variables in influencing participants, subjects. So what this does is what experimental design allows you is to have a very granular view of variables and participants and influences, and you can really see the details of and the comparative data that's generated, which the generation of which we will discuss in the next slide. Okay, so there are 4 procedural characteristics and properties of that underlies good research matching conditions. So first of all, valid treatment conditions. So in research matching, you can only apply this method if the treatment conditions are the subject is experimented on or the subject is not experimented on. The reason for this is the group division. In research matching, participants are first matched into pairs, and then one of each pair will be assigned into a control group, and the other of the pair will be assigned into the experimental group. Now, the control group will not have an experiment done to them, but the treatment group will have an experiment done to them. So what this allows us to see is really point out, triangulate how factors, how characteristics and other such variables can influence the outcome of an experiment as it applies to a participant, right? And that's and again that falls into the purview of so we've talked about pilot treatment conditions, group division, and subject assignment in group division, in the sense that we've talked about how to divide people, which person goes to which, and then also range. So finding matching people can be quite hard. For example, it's hard to find a person that's 50 kilograms and match it with a person that's also 50 kilograms. So what researchers have done over the years is to define ranges of variables acceptable variables instead. For example, instead of saying this, we need to match a person that's 50 kilograms with a person that's also 50 kilograms. They can just say, we need to match a person that weighs between 40 to 50 kilograms with another person that weighs between 40 to 50 kilograms. So range is important in research matching, because it lets researchers have a degree of flexibility of pairing people when the numbers can be tweaked a bit without necessarily affecting the projected outcome of the experiment, right? So that would be the 4 procedural characteristics of research matching. Now, what does it actually look like? Now we can turn to the next slide and find out. Okay, next slide. Okay, so let's say that there's a study on how a new type of diet affects underweight people, right? So in this study, a researcher recruits 200 people, and then after recruiting 200 people, we establish 100 pairs of participants. Each pair shares similar body characteristic ranges. For example, a 20-year-old female who's between 40 to 50 kilograms in weight and 150 to 60 centimeters in height is paired with another female who shares characteristics within this range. It doesn't have to be precisely 50 kilograms. It doesn't have to be precisely 156 centimeters. It can be between these two values. Another pair between a 30-year-old male who weighs from 50 to 60 kilograms and is 176 to 180 centimeter tall is also established. We repeat until we are done. And then after all pairs are made, subjects are divided into a treatment and control group. So from each pair, we take away one person, and then we put them in the control group, and then we take the other person and put them in the experiment group. Then the experiment group, the treatment group, in other words, follows the new diet for a month, while the control group does not. So afterwards, the weight loss for each participant between the treatment and control is recorded. So the data gathered from the study can then be sorted out variable by variable to generate consistent comparative knowledge between characteristics. Next slide, please.
Okay, and in this part, I will talk about the advantages of this research. The first advantage is controls over variables. It is easier to classify changes within the pairs to the treatment being studied because the researchers pair participants with people that share similar characteristics, which directly reduces the lurking variables in participants' variables. For example, both age and gender can have a significant effect on weight loss. By matching subjects based on these two variables, we are eliminating the effect that these two variables could have on weight loss, since we are only comparing the weight loss between subjects who are identical in age and gender. The second advantage is order effect elimination. For those of you that don't know, order effect refers to any differences in participant responses as a result of the order in which experimental materials are presented to them. With the matched pairs design, each subject only receives one treatment and therefore the order effect is eliminated. I will go to the next slide. The disadvantages of this research is the first one is data loss. If a participant drops out of the study, the data of the participant that they are paired with will no longer be useful in this research design. Therefore, in such a case, the researcher will lose the participant's data. If one subject decides to drop out of the study, we actually lose two subjects, since we no longer have a complete pair. And the second disadvantage is time-consuming. Finding matches can be an extremely time-consuming process to find subjects with certain match variables. Particularly, if more than two variables are used, for example, it might not be hard to find 5 females to use as pairs, but it could be quite hard to find 50 female pairs with the same age. Okay, Charles F. Kettering once said, "Research means that you don't know, but are willing to find out." Yeah, that's it from our presentation. Thank you for listening. That's about it. See ya.